And do you go by Joshua or Josh?
I go by Josh.
Okay.
If you're French, this is perfect for localization. I did have a girlfriend for 2 weeks when I was 16 in England for a summer camp that her name was Peggy Frey. And she called me Joshua, and I would melt. I mean, really,
So if I were French speaking, I should call you Joshua.
French-speaking people can call me Joshua. Otherwise, usually I just go with Josh.
Okay.
Talking about localization. I'm Josh Halpern, former U.S. diplomat, helping entrepreneurs sell to the billions of consumers overseas. We're living in a time of unprecedented opportunity for small businesses that know how to optimize their e-commerce channels. Find out how some fail, some succeed, and how you can leapfrog the competition. This is Vambassador. So with that said, Wendy Pease from Rapport International, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I am good. Thanks for having me.
How do you say this word rapport? I always have to do a mental note. It's not report, it's rapport.
It's rapport. Yes.
Tell us the origin of the word rapport in your as a company name, and ultimately, you know, who you are and all this stuff that you're doing.
Ironically, I had nothing to do with the name Rapport. See, I bought the business 16 years ago and the prior owner named it that, but I love it. It's a French word about building relationships and community. And that's what we're all about. We work to connect people across languages and cultures for a peaceful and prosperous world.
Wow, that's great. That is a bold mission that is ever more needed today. So it's really wonderful to see. You know, I want to understand more about you and who you are, how you came to do this and ended up, buying the business, because there's clearly a passion you have. When I see the content you put out, even just the messages, there are so few messages that I get on my email that I actually am happy to receive. And you are the top of the list, because I was like, oh, this is gonna be fun. What is this one about?
Oh, thank you so much. That's so wonderful to hear.
Where does that, what was the seed of that passion?
I lived in Mexico, Taiwan, and the Philippines when I was a child growing up. So I know what it's like to live in an environment where you don't speak the language. And there's, all sorts of pluses and minuses with it. And the pluses are you realize that people are the same everywhere. They want to connect. And that there's so many ways that you can communicate without words. Smiles is the only universal gesture that means the same thing. Head nods can mean different things, and hand gestures can mean different things. But a smile you can put on your face, you can use hand gestures and pointing. But there's nothing like really understanding what the other person says. And so coming back to the United States, when I was in high school and through college, I majored in foreign service. I took all the language courses that I could. I've traveled as much as I could. So I love the global community. I love learning about people with differences. And I'm passionate about helping people communicate clearly.
Well, that's great. And now you've had a business for quite some time. What are the common things that you're seeing companies do? Let's say, how do we say this? Yeah, I mean, I hate to start with a negative, but really, let's start with what are the things that companies should do that they're often not doing by the time they get to you?
So they are using Google Translate, which is great for if you get an email and you need to figure out what it is. It's great for if you're in a situation, you have an immediate need, and you're trying to figure out how to say something. It's great for helping you figure out something in another language. So casual uses where you have no liability. What I see companies doing is saying, ooh, machine translation and AI is going to give us a good quality translation. So they're putting the Google Translate plugin on their website, and it's causing so many problems. If you know anything about another language, you know that it's not accurately capturing the meaning. You can get the gist. Number two, I see people putting it on there, and they don't even translate the drop-down menu. So if I go to a Chinese website and I'm looking for the English version, I can't even find English because it's written in Chinese. Number three, they bury it on the bottom of their website, so it's not even up in the top right-hand corner, which is the standard place where you'd put a language switcher. And number four, you may be endangering your search engine optimization, because Google Translate is taking your English copy and putting it in another language, and that is showing up as the same text. So it could show up as duplicate content, and so it's doing nothing for your website.
Just so people understand that, so SEO, obviously when you have duplicate content, it's negatively impacting your SEO. So if they're translating, you're saying it reads as duplicate content.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So Wendy, a lot of the companies I talk to, it's not that they don't want to translate their sites, but they've got this economic challenge, right? What are some of the incremental things you can do to start engaging appropriately and localizing content with your overseas communities without breaking the bank?
That's an excellent question, because that's another thing that we'll see is companies come to us and say, well, we need to translate our website. And then they get sticker shock at that. And so that happened enough times years ago where I said, well, time out. What we want to do is understand your strategy, your company strategy. Why are you translating your website? Then your marketing strategy. How do your communications line up with your company strategy? And then from there, you can pick up a translation strategy. And if you're only selling one product internationally, why would you translate your whole website? You can just do a landing page and give the pertinent information. We had another client that said, I'm getting inquiries in from China, and I want to be able to translate the emails, understand what they say, and then respond. And in talking to him about strategy, we figured out that he basically gets the same questions. So if he could write those questions and answer them, then he's got a landing page where he puts a little bit about us, answers the questions that they want to know, and then a way to order or get in touch with them, because I think they could order online, but otherwise, you could add in telephone interpreting if somebody actually has to talk to you. But right there, it wasn't his whole website. It was answering the pertinent question for the Chinese inquiries coming in. And then once you figure out what your strategy is, and you pick one language, and then you develop a process for it. So what is it that we're going to do? How are we going to do it? Is there any technology we want to leverage for moving information back and forth and get the high quality? We're not going to use the Google Translate. So once you get the strategy, process, technology, and quality figured out with one language in your content, then it's easy to duplicate across other languages when you want to expand into other places.
That's interesting. Let me needle in on that a little bit, Wendy. So when you're developing your site, let's say you start out, you've got a fresh site, you're doing it in English. You're not expecting yet to translate, but how should you develop that hierarchy of content? Or is there an Excel sheet you should be putting each field in? I know there's certain ways to do it in a smart way so that when it does come time to translate, it's more of a good workflow.
Exactly. What we see with people is that they try to create content right on the platform and then they're changing it, which means you've got to download it and you've got to upload it. And if you go through multiple iterations, we don't want all those versions. We want your final English to come to translation, because that's another step in getting high quality. So say you use a Google Doc, and you write your blog in that. Then you can start a folder and put your translations in that, or so you can build it out that way. There's all sorts of programs where you can calendar out what you're going to do. You can do your English 1 month and then lag it a month behind. So you create and launch your English and then it goes into translation for launch. So there's a month lag, but oftentimes content is just continued learning. It's not time sensitive. So then you build it in. Translation takes about as much time for writing, so you could even do 2 weeks for writing and then 2 weeks for translation and be on the same monthly schedule. There's so many different ways. And then the other thing is on your social media, I'll see people go ahead and translate their website, pop it up there, and then do all their social media only in English. And they have a plan for that. You have a monthly plan. You know what you're going to be posting every day, or you've set it up in your system to go out. Share that document where you've built it for translation, or share the program you're working in, then translate it and send it out. And there's all sorts of ways that you can do LinkedIn in multiple languages too. So I did a webinar for somebody else that talked about best practices on that.
What's the most efficient way to localize your content on social media?
I love this. Bill Gates said that content is king. Okay? From there, marketers have added in consistency is queen. And we add in translation is your princess to attract people in. Okay, so if you're creating content, it shouldn't be just like a knee-jerk reaction. It should be an editorial calendar for what you're going to produce in the, week, month, quarter, year, whatever time frame you're going to do. If you're thoughtful about what you're planning, then you just add translation into the process, and that's how you can send it out through social media.
Okay, and some people talk about how to limit the amount of text content or even audio content on your social media so that your translation is minimized as well and make it more visual. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So if you can use a visual a picture is 1,000 words. So if you can use a picture that's culturally appropriate and gets the message across, you can do it. Now, I do recommend if you're building a visual, not to build the words in the middle of it. Drop a text box on top. So just that text box needs to be edited, not the whole visual. So that's certainly a way to do it.
Let's talk quickly about how do you vet the right translation company?
Excellent question. It used to be I would go to networking meetings and people would go, translation, who needs that? What do you need that for? Then about, say, 5 to 7 years ago, people started asking, isn't Google going to put you out of business? And now recently people are saying, do you do that thing where you make it appropriate for the cultural adaptation? So through this evolution, I have seen companies really dig down in and specialize in different areas. There are some companies that specialize in large legal cases that might have a room full of discovery, lots of paperwork that needs to be translated, but they're trying to narrow it down to the 2 small folders of the pertinent information that they want. Send it through machine translation, find those, and then you might be able to get away. Well, then you have a human translator. There are other companies that do machine translation with post-editing. So they'll run it through like a Google Translate, and then they'll have a human make modifications to it. But it still sounds stilted and it doesn't sound high quality. You've got other companies that do an Uber model where they'll pull the project in and send it out to whoever claims it first. And it's cheap, it's fast, but you're not getting any consistency of who's on there, and all your information is going out on the internet, so you've lost confidentiality. But in some situations, that's okay if you want it cheap and fast and good enough. And then there's all the way moving up to a company like ours where we're looking at the strategy, we're doing high quality, 100% satisfaction guarantee, we carry a liability insurance policy, and we only want the stuff that has to be high quality that could affect your bottom line.
It seems to me hard to manage translation. When I'm living overseas, I always know somebody's sister, brother, spouse who says, I'm doing translation, you have any translation work? And I always feel like, well, in 6 months from now, I know they're going to get another job. They're going to be somewhere else. They're probably going to be in another country, and they're going to be, how do you maintain consistency in your staff?
Like I said, I bought the company about 16 years ago. The company was founded in 1987, so it's over 30 years old. We're still working with some of the linguists that we worked with from the start. And we do something called linguistic matchmaking. So when a client comes in and we're listening to the strategy and what they're trying to accomplish, we come up with which translator we're going to appoint to that client. And then we keep them on that to keep that consistency of voice and keep learning. Because translation's like writing. You find somebody who has a style that you like and you're going to want to stick with them. Now, hiring somebody, I just did a cost analysis of if you have an employee do your translation, so not an employee that you hire to do translation as full-time and you vet it and everything like that, but an employee that you say, they could just add this onto their job. Well, this is, if you take a person that you figure they have to be pretty smart to be able to do it, because they have to be able to read and write in the source language and in the target language. And they've got to, have somewhat of a position at the company. So say they make $75,000. From that, the lost opportunity cost for what they'd be producing is more than what you'd pay a translator. And that's figuring out what their hourly salary is, how long it's going to take them, the benefits added in on top of their hourly salary, and the productivity that they're not giving back to the company.
Very good point. It's true. People do think like that. They say, well, I got this person and maybe I could just ask them to work a couple more hours. And also the nuances is so critical. What I often talk about is when you're localizing, that doesn't mean translating content. It's translating the meaning, the essence of what you're saying. But people get that wrong. How, in terms of...
Let me go back to the $75,000. That was the salary range that I looked at on a spreadsheet that I ran by somebody that I had on my Global Marketing Show podcast, because we got into discussion about it. So that worked for that. But I think it's even cheaper to hire out to a translation company, even if the employee makes $50,000 a year. So it's my next blog, so I'll have it ironed out more, but I was surprised at the numbers.
I'm trying to think, okay, so there's incremental things. We've covered kind of how do you go incremental. These are some incremental things to do. Common mistakes companies make. When a company comes to you and they say, hey, I love translation. When a company comes to you and asks for your help, what is the situation that makes you gleeful and excited when you say, well, tell me about your situation and how do you currently have your content organized? I mean, is there certain things that somebody who, if they really want to take advantage of and be efficient and not kind of drag you down into their mess, how should they be presenting their content?
Well, that's one thing that we're really good at, is figuring out what their mess is and streamlining it. But here's what gets me excited is the opportunity that's out there. There's something that's called an accidental exporter. Now, you're in international work. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, it's where we talk about the transition between a passive to a proactive exporter. So, yeah. Yes, exactly. So there are companies, particularly now, that can't go out and do their traditional ways of selling, so they're paying more attention to online. And if they look at their numbers, they can see where visitors are coming in from. And so we've picked up some clients that call up and they go, we're getting business from Germany. We're wondering if we should translate into German. And so I love that, because people are paying attention to where their visitors are coming from, and they're realizing what an opportunity the world is to sell in. And it doesn't take, in the olden days when I was younger, you had to go get an expert and do an analysis and figure out who might want your, it's still worthwhile to do all that. But you can use information that's coming in and adjust quickly. That's a great point, and that's something that we consistently are talking about, which is you can be incremental now, you can be global day one, you can be all about global with feedback that you previously would have had to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for consulting.
Yes. And many, many trips over to make relationships and try to identify your buyers. But now you can do research online. You can pop a page of translation up, which our minimum charge is $95. I mean, it's not a lot to put, a little bit of content up there and see what happens.
That's a great point. Let me ask you about the STEP grant. A company just got $3,000 to $10,000, depends on the state, depending on where they're at. Some of it's now able to be used for website localization, translation, digital marketing. What do you got for them off the shelf or not off the shelf?
Oh, we got stuff off the shelf. It's real exciting. We put this together this year, and it's, one of those great mousetraps that we've built, but we haven't talked about. So I'm so glad you asked me about this. What we did is we spent time interviewing people that give out the STEP grants, saying, what are people looking for? And as you know, I think STEP grants used to cover a lot of travel to go international to meet people. Well, they've changed that. They can now optimize their website for bringing business in with inbound marketing. Now, we're a HubSpot partner, so we're specialists in inbound marketing, and we specialize just in the translation. So we put together a package, and it's on our website of, okay, if you need to update your website, this is what it'll be. And we have a HubSpot partner that specializes in doing strategy and website and content that would take care of that. Then you can roll that into our translation packages that will show you exactly how much it will cost for how much content you want to do. And then when you get into, if you need content written, you could write it internally, or if you want to outsource it, we have packages for developing that. And then for your social media, so you don't just pop it up, but you also translate your social media and get that going on a monthly basis. So we've looked at STEP grants. We've looked at what kind of, by state it does vary by money, but we put together packages that should hit the different requirements for companies.
I think it's really important to look at those, as you're saying, those incremental pieces. You also mentioned that you guys do your own writing, for example. If I say, hey, I'd like to do something, even in English, before I translate it, do you write original content as well?
We do some. We've been asked by clients to do some of that, and I've been doing market research on whether this would be a valuable product for us to wrap together, as we'll write it in the global English so it's appropriate for translation. If you use too much slang or humor or idioms, it can be very hard to translate. So there's a global English, not that everybody speaks it, but it's clear for translation. So we're looking at offering those services together, but if we're not the appropriate people to write the content because of the subject matter or whatever, then we've got lots of partners that we can introduce you to.
This is very helpful, Wendy. When you're localizing content for social media, your suggestion is to have it prepped with lead time. How much lead time is appropriate, aside from the lead time you'd naturally want as a social media strategist, but lead time from a translation perspective, what's an appropriate time frame?
Well, again, it depends on what your process is. So we're going to customize it down to clients. So if you're doing, we build out a plan. So if you have monthly content, we'll want to know when it's going to come in and when you want it to turn around. But let me give you some guidelines for that. Okay, we say with any project, just give us 3 to 5 days, because that allows it to come in, get scheduled, any questions answered, quality control, and get it out the door. Okay, so we can do same day turnaround, but there's an upcharge for that because then we're rushing it out. But if you allow 3 to 5 days for a smaller project, now if you have a larger project, allow about 1,000 words per day. Now translators can work faster than that, but if you use that as a guideline for 1,000 words per day, you can say, okay, 8,000 words, it's going to take me 8 days to do. You can build that into your process. And again, it allows time for getting it in, any questions, revisions, quality assurance, and delivery of it.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Can you give us also a guideline on expected cost we should be looking at? And I say that understanding that there's a wide range. And I also believe that if you went on Upwork and you find a translator or elsewhere, it may be cheaper, but the quality definitely suffers. So there's clearly a point where you don't want to go below that, because it's going to, unfortunately, it's not going to work out in your favor. Local school, I've got an international student. I understand that there's a range of quality, but if you could give us an idea of what you should be looking at if you want good quality work done, that'd be helpful.
So let's lay a framework for how translation is priced. So if you're translating into Spanish here in the United States, that's going to be the least expensive language because we have more access to Spanish translators. If you get into European languages, that's the next cost level. Once you get into character levels, there's a premium on that because it is harder, and it's harder to find qualified people for that. So first you look at the language, then you look at the content. Is it something that's general communications? It's not that difficult. Any trained translator could do. That's not going to be as high. If it's highly technical, it's a patent application or, it's a chemical process, something like that, you're going to pay a premium because that person has to know both languages, but then they have to know the terminology in there. So language, subject matter, and then you look at the length of the document. So if it's a short document, like I said, $95 is our minimum charge. You could go off to an independent person. You could pay a lot less because they're thinking, it won't take me that long. If it's a long document or it's something recurring, like we do newsletters and we know when they're going to come in every month and we know the general range of what it's going to be, we could price it at the lower end because it's consistent business coming in. And then if you add any of the extras like a rush charge or you need layout for it, it's graphics with embedded text, anything like that, there's going to be an upcharge for it.
So it sounds to me like if you are determined to get good quality translation, there are a few things you could do to reduce those costs. One is plan ahead so that you can build a consistency in your workflow, right? The other is to provide the information in an organized fashion, probably isolate what parts of this is technical versus non-technical.
Yes.
Okay.
And repeat copy. That's a huge one. Repeat copy. If you have a lot of repeat copy, take it out before you send it to the translation company, because that's just longer, and we're not going to know when it's repeat copy unless we're using a translation management system, which we're not going to use the first time through.
That's a good point. For example, if you have folders or even websites that all have an introduction, every time the introduction, you're going to get paid. Yeah, of course, that makes sense. And I would totally miss that.
Disclaimer or company description. And then the other thing that I see with some clients is they might have all their project managers sending in translation at a time. So it could be a paragraph here, a paragraph there. If you know, if you kind of guide that through and put all the translation together, then it's not a minimum charge. Like we did a project for a school, and there were 5 letters that had to go out to parents, and they were going to send them out one at a time. So, minimum charge, $95, it's about $500. They sent them all together so we could clump it as one project, and it ended up costing them about $300 or less than $300. So they almost saved half of what it was by being strategic on their process, or, efficient on their process.
And so that's also very interesting, because people often think, it's translation. I don't speak Greek. Just get it out, get it away from my desk and just get it into their hands. But actually, that the translation starts after you've organized your content. So organize your content.
That's the biggest thing that I see as shame is people they spend all this time on creating a marketing message, making sure that it's worded just right. They're going to be consistent at it. And then they go, well, I don't know the language, so just get it done. They send it off to somebody who shops on price. They get it in, and then they get feedback from the market of this isn't good. I mean, we've had so many people come to us.
If they're lucky, because you don't always get the feedback and you have no idea. So last couple questions here. So when you're talking about the future of translation, where do you see the market going? And you mentioned obviously the machine learning, and luckily there's still a lot of way to go for that. There's those headphones now that you can put in and you can listen. But what do you think we're going to be doing in 10 years?
I don't think that human translators will ever go away. What I've seen Google Translate and AI and machine translation do is just elevate the accessibility of it and the awareness of how important quality is. So this industry has grown phenomenally. I mean, it used to not, when I first got into it 16 years ago, there was no investors looking at it. Over the last, since the technology came around, I get lots of calls about wanting to buy my company. So there's still an area for quality, and I don't think that'll ever go away. What's exciting about it is those earphones that you can put in. They're great for travel. They're great for casual business. Like you go out on a business meeting and you don't speak the same language, and it's expensive to have a live interpreter there to facilitate. You can put those in and you can have fun with it. You're not negotiating deals. What's scary about that to me is if you go on the website to read about it, they'll talk about how it can work. And I had some medical clinics that were applying for grants. I was a grant reviewer for them for those. And I know that that quality isn't there. So I said, it's a waste of their grant money. There are other things they could do, like video remote interpreting, telephone interpreting, where you're leveraging this kind of technology to do a speaking engagement rather than having a person show up.
That's important to know, especially if you're out there looking to get heart surgery in a country where they don't speak English. If they are using those headphones, you may not get the heart surgery that you're looking for. That's like in Spies Like Us, when they're in the doctor. I don't know if you remember that movie. I'm dating myself, but they were all like, and if they had those headphones, it would even be uglier, I guess.
That's what's scary, because the liability in that, occasionally I'll take call on the weekend because we do schedule interpreters for hospitals and clinics. And I remember early on, I took a call from somebody who was at a hospital. They had a woman that was giving birth, didn't speak English. They needed an interpreter. I'm like, no problem. Got somebody over there within like 20 minutes. And they were able to, but I was like, I cannot even imagine being in the hospital giving birth and not understanding the language.
Oh my gosh.
I have tons of stories like that too.
So that's also interesting. So you do simultaneous translation as well?
Yeah, so consecutive would be the kind that you'd have at the hospital where they're repeating everything each person says. And then simultaneous is like the UN where they have the headsets on, or we're doing it for Zoom now. There's a platform that people can get on and listen. So we could have an interpreter right here and be broadcasting this to, any one of hundreds of languages.
That's interesting. So I would put you on mute and then somehow have another feed of audio that would give me the translation?
And it would be the interpreter because that's spoken, and the interpreter would be watching the presentation on Zoom and then would be interpreting live.
So that is a peek into the future. You don't even have to travel to see people or understand them.
And I think that's what's going to happen with virtual conference shows. I mean, I think some will go back to live, but I think we've just expanded our global connection of the kinds of people we can meet and connections we can meet.
Wendy, thanks for joining us. Thanks for helping us understand this space. For the last question, I guess, for all of us looking for a new generation, we've got kids. What should we do to get them excited about global, get them excited about learning languages, and hopefully working for Rapport and someday?
Travel, travel, travel. You can't learn about, you can't learn about another country without going there. Where's your favorite country that you've been?
So we lived for an extended period of time in India, in China, Taiwan, you arguably say China, and Mexico and Spain. And I would say Mexico was our surprise joy. We loved all of them, and for very different reasons. The vibrancy, the sweetness of the people, and then to us, it was like being in the States in the sense of proximity, so we still could see family, but it was different enough that we really felt like we were in a different country. To my pleasant surprise, people didn't speak English as much as we thought they would, especially we were in Mexico City. But we hit Mumbai, Beijing, and Mexico. But I was already, even when I said Mumbai, I started doing this. Yeah.
Head nod.
But I would say we liked all of them, and they were very populous cities, but such wonderful people. But Mexico was definitely dear to our heart.
Yeah, I was in first and second grade there and had a wonderful experience. And my parents look back on Mexico. The whole, the celebration of families and the importance of children and the kindness of the people.
My son was there, so he just finished kindergarten he was in school for 2.5 years in Liceo Franco Mexicano, so the French-Mexican school there. So we've just been bombarding him, and I'm not going to tell him, but we're actually taking him now to go into a Chinese immersion. But they do talk about the more languages. It's not just about language acquisition, but it stretches the brain and the vocal and the muscular kind of use in different ways. So.
Yeah, the only thing that I say is, he's at the age for language acquisition, and when I look for experts to work for us, I want them to be really good at 2 languages. So you got to think about what career is he going to end up. Is he going to be a global business person that having a little bit of lots of languages will help? Or is he going to want to go in to be a linguistics expert where then you want to have 2 strong languages? And I can already tell you there's no way you can figure it out. I wanted my kids to play soccer, and they got me into lacrosse instead of me getting them into soccer. Yeah, because I started taking them on a global trip every year. I mean, they've been to Mexico, Peru, Panama, London, India. There's been more, but I can't remember. Yes, sure. Canada.
Well, it's exciting. And where are you based again? We didn't cover that.
Outside of Boston.
Boston has its own accent and language there. Wendy Pease from Rapport, thanks for joining us again. Van Ambassador, we're excited to chat, and we always will see you out there on the road, wherever it is in the world, and thanks for all your help.